I always known that people on the other side of the street had a better life, until I went towards them and realized that they were only interested in a different life, not a better one. Howard Schultz grew up in a severely deprived family of 5. His father was a retired veteran who made a living driving trucks and delivering goods. Both of his parents worked, but they struggled to afford their $96 monthly rent at a charity home. You may have seen the conditions of these homes in movies. Their neighborhood was a poor area in New York that had no special amenities other than a basketball court. The children and their families saw no hope or aspirations for themselves. It was like a slave quarters but more modern. All of this wasn't enough, that the merciful God brought upon them another tragedy. One day, when 7-year-old Howard returned from school, he saw that his father's feet were plastered. That day, while delivering his cargo, his father slipped on ice and fell to the ground, breaking his hip. He didn't have proper health insurance, and his employer fired him. Schultz describes this situation. Days went by, and I saw how my father's self-confidence and self-esteem diminished more and more every day. Now, let me tell you about one of the secrets of the success of the protagonist of the story. Howard's mother strongly believed in the American dream. She always said that people could make a decent life in this country through education and hard work. She drew a beautiful building plan in her children's minds, like an architect. She molded their minds like clay to create an entrepreneurial mindset that would save her children from their bitter fate. At the age of only 12, he tasted the bitter flavor of poverty as he worked as a newspaper seller. After that, he worked as a waiter in restaurants and cafes and later in a thrift and leather store that was among the hard jobs. It is even said that he had to sell his own blood twice to buy something to eat. Let me mention another point. For Howard, success wasn't about having a luxury car or a house with a swimming pool. It was his escape from a bitter fate that his parents had accepted with bitterness. From enduring poverty until the arrival of death, and being buried with a lifetime of regrets and dreams, to become the sweet taste in the mouths of earthworms. He succeeded to enter the University of Michigan on an athletic scholarship, but life didn't let go of his throat. It was during his early university years that he got injured, and as a result, his scholarship was cut off. Nevertheless, he did everything he could to complete his education. However, after finishing university, he opened the doors of hope for himself. He applied for a job at Xerox, and they accepted him. He went through sales training and eventually became a top sales manager. After that, he joined Homeaplast and became the sales manager there. He received a considerable income and benefits from that company, but something caught his attention there. The orders for coffee machines from a small business called Starbucks were very high. Although it was a small company in Seattle, it was increasing its orders every year. The original owners of Starbucks were Jerry Baldwin, Gordon Boker, and Zev Siegel. The story goes that one day, Gordon discovered a guy named Pitt who prepared coffee in a different way. At that time, Americans either drank instant coffee or brewed coffee. Gordon told this story to Jerry and Zev, and the three of them went to Pitt to learn how to make coffee. Pitt accepted, and after they learned the art, they entered the powdered coffee sales business. To let people taste their delightful coffee, they brewed a little coffee for them to test. Howard went to one of their stores and tasted Starbucks coffee. Suddenly, a new world unfolds before him. It was like that he has rediscovered the love of his adolescence. He named it the shining jewel. Howard describes that moment as follows. When I entered a Starbucks store for the first time, it felt like I was at home. It's hard to explain, but I knew I was in a special place. Their product somehow spoke to me. I had never tasted a good cup of coffee before. In a meeting I had with the founders of the company and heard the story of good coffee for the first time, that's when I said to myself, oh my God, this is what I want to do as a profession for the rest of my life. That moment never left Howard's mind until one day he resigned from the company he was working for and applied for a job at Starbucks. However, everyone was against his presence there. I don't know why, but perhaps having a New Yorker here wasn't digestible to them in Seattle. But after much effort, he started working there as the director of marketing and market development with half the salary and strict conditions. His mother, who saw Howard's shine in the Swiss company as a glimmer of hope, always told her son not to ruin his luck by working for an unknown company, but he didn't listen. After a year, his mind was preoccupied with why Starbucks doesn't serve coffee in their stores instead of selling coffee powder. This story began with a trip to Italy where he tasted the flavor of café latte for the first time. He brought this idea to Seattle with great excitement, but they didn't welcome his idea. They said he was a get-carried-away business manager who had just returned from an exhibition in Italy. They said they were a retail business, not a restaurant or a bar. Let me tell you something right here. Whenever someone tells you that you are daydreaming and your dream is worthless, give them a slap on the back of your hand. You'll understand why at the end of this video. In fact, at that time, Starbucks was in debt and seeking loans and repayments, so they were in a defensive state. Except for him, I myself have seen people who lack the motivation to advance in their work. This caused Howard's frustration. One day, after playing basketball and having a conversation with his lawyer friend Scott, he recounted the story to him. Scott, who saw the spark in Howard's eyes, said, "Why don't you do it yourself? I know some investors, and I can arrange a meeting for you." After that, Howard left Starbucks and started meeting various investors. This is where the character of the wealthy entrepreneur Howard manifests itself. He named his new business Il Giornale because Americans read newspapers while drinking coffee. After the news of Howard's activities unfolded, Jerry Baldwin invited Howard for a meeting and said that Starbucks wanted to invest $150,000 in his venture. Howard was very happy because after all, Starbucks was a well-known company in Seattle. After that, he went to Italy to research coffee and find more investors. He thought he could turn a profit with $1 million, but again his idea was met with opposition. They said that Americans don't like the taste of Italian espresso. After that, he returned to America and founded the first branch of Il Giornale with loans and private investment, and he pursued all kinds of investors. But in the end, out of 242 individuals and companies, 217 of them said no to him.
What? Il Giornale? I can't even pronounce it.
Are you suggesting we invest our money in a coffee shop?
Are you crazy? Why did you leave Starbucks?
These were offensive remarks, but Howard was tougher than that. Most investors were interested in technology, not coffee. Initially, the business was a bit challenging, and sometimes there was not enough money to cover the store's expenses. That's why Howard approached 3 Starbucks partners. In the end, they agreed to invest an additional $750 in Il Giornale under strict business management conditions. In 1987, luck smiled upon Howard. Starbucks was seeking to buy the Peet's Coffee brand and had put it up for sale. Knowing that Howard could handle it, they offered him the opportunity to purchase it and gave him 60 days to come up with $3.8 million. The investors of Il Giornale were satisfied with the progress, and Howard knew he could raise that money. But Howard was losing Starbucks before he bought it. One of the tough guys in Seattle offered $4 million to buy it. After hearing this news, Howard went to his lawyer friend to negotiate with that person. The outcome of the meeting was nothing but threats and arguments from that person. He even threatened Howard that if he insists on buying Starbucks, he would do something to make his investors withdraw their money from Il Giornale. Howard left the room at the peak of despair. All his dreams seemed to have been lost. His mother's voice, telling him not to ruin his future, echoed in his ears. He cried in the hallway. It was a cry of helplessness. It seemed like he was trying not to hear the voices of those who said you can't do it. Howard wrote about these recent events in his diary, saying, "Many of us face sensitive and critical situations like this in our lives, when that our dreams falling apart. We can never be prepared for such situations, but how we react to them is crucial. It's important that do not forget our values. We must be brave and fair at the same time, not give up and do not lose our hope. If we have a cohesive team, we will surely succeed." However, Howard did not give up. He continued to engage in conversations with various investors until his lawyer friend arranged a meeting with another investor. That investor was none other than Bill Gates Sr., father of the famous Bill Gates. He was a 2.7-meter tall giant, and his son had not yet made a name for himself. When Mr. Bill Gates hears Howard's story, he says, "Come to this address in 2 hours." They both head to the office of the person who made Howard cry and put his hand on the table, staring into his eyes, and says, "You shouldn't buy Starbucks. This kid's supposed to achieve his dream." Apparently, that person succumbs to the words of Gates, and agrees. After the meeting, Howard confused and asks Mr. Gates what exactly happened. "Since you only yelled and then we came out." In response, says, "You are going to buy Starbucks, my son and I will help you." Finally, on August 18, 1987, Starbucks is reborn. A $100 billion business that holds 57% of the global coffee market. Just imagine, if he would have given up at that moment when his dreams were slipping away and the voices of those who said you can't do it repeated louder than ever in his mind, he couldn't live his dreams and our dreams. The year 2007 was a challenging year for the global economy, and many restaurants and cafes were forced to close. Starbucks also felt the impact. However, the interesting point was how it confronted this global crisis. Howard, who had resigned as the chief executive officer, caused a 9% surge in the shares of the giant Starbucks by the twist of news about his return to the last position. First he closed 900 stores and temporarily suspended 6,700 baristas. One day, for special hours, he ordered all the branches to close and participate in an online class to enhance the quality of their services. This reminded people why they should love Starbucks. During his trip to Italy, Howard had gained a fresh experience by observing the preparation of coffee and interaction between baristas and customers. It began greatest asset and strength of Starbucks. Howard ordered to grind the coffee while preparing it, so that the aroma of coffee would captivate people. These strategies proved profitable, resulting in a 143% increase in sales in 2008. Interestingly, each section of this video refers to the words and guidance of successful people, some of which I share daily in short videos. Starbucks also made several mistakes. Pay attention here so that we don't have to experience others' mistakes again. From the beginning, in his coffee shop's Il Giornale, he played Italian opera music. This might be more interesting in a non-European random country like Turkmenistan, where Italian culture brings freshness and a unique charm, but it didn't work well in America, where there is a kind of superiority complex. The result we can draw from this is that everything has its suitable place. Let me illustrate the next point with an example. When does an incurable and contagious disease get eradicated? When it reaches its maximum. Starbucks faced a similar situation. It had opened so many branches that in some American neighborhoods, people had several choices to choose one. In results, sales of some branches were not sufficient. So they closed some branches and afterward paid more attention to the selection of location for each branch. So if you want to start a business, pay attention to the market situation and your competitors. Think about what people need your work fulfills. Starbucks also implemented another extraordinary idea. In tourist areas, they opened branches each with an area of 20,000 square meters. In addition to serving coffee, the baristas were allowed to create new and innovative drinks based on their creativity and customer preferences. This idea was successful, and for example, the Shanghai branch generated a daily income of $64,000 in its first weeks of operation. One of Howard's most important actions was compelling Starbucks investors to enter into an agreement with Arizona State University, one of the renowned universities in the United States and the world, to allocate 42% of scholarships to Starbucks employees. This scholarship covers all educational expenses for Starbucks employees, except for the cost of books and laptops. Starbucks has a plan to assist its employees in purchasing these necessities by providing loans and financial aid. This way, a brand becomes a brand with a win-win mindset. Are those employees and their families not loyal to the brand, and don't they work with all their heart and soul for it? Beloveds who are watching this video, appreciate yourselves. You are valuable. According to one of the Iranian poets, if greatness lies in the lion's mouth, take the risk and go for it. Because either you will achieve greatness, honor, and your dreams, or you will live your life and death like the great ones. Don't worry about not reaching your dreams, because the seeker will find. Even if you don't reach the goal, at least you won't regret for what you didn't do. Please forgive my rudeness for advising you. In the future, I will create a video include Howard Schultz's motivational quotes and guidance. Until then, pay attention to the next story, which is one of the most influential motivational stories and the main fuel for all my efforts. Empower your mind with knowledge and always follow wisdom. In hopes of narrating mine and your success story,